Welcome back, everybody. We're just kind of moving right through our semester here. We're in our module 3, and I just wanted to give you a little bit additional information about assessments and scoring and types of assessments that you're going to run across as a counselor. So some terminology that you're going to need to know is what a raw score is, transformed scores are, and criteria reference scores. So the raw score is the score that of the number of correctly answered items. The transformed scores helps us interpreting what's going on. And the criterion reference scores has to do with the amount of knowledge estimated. Here we talk about norm reference scores and representation. So norm reference scores in all standardized assessments, you should be able to go to the manual and take a look at what is the norm of the population. Is the person being tested, are they being represented within the norm? So for an example, if you're using an assessment that's testing 3rd grade Anglo male children, would you want to take that same test, that assessment, and apply it to 1st grade Hispanic females? Would that be representative? No. Also, you have norm reference scores where you can compare an individual's test scores to test scores of another group of people. An example of, let's say Edinburgh High School North is the test scores are compared to Edinburgh High School South. All right? Now with percentile and stay 9, percentile is a value below which a specific percentage of cases falls. So for example, 75%. This score is higher than 74% of the other scores. However, 25% of those scores are higher than the 75%. Stay 9 is short for standard 9, which converts a distribution into 9 parts, 1 to 9, with 5 being in the middle and a standard deviation of 2. Now we also have standardized scores. The standardized score scale is used like a common language that we can use to compare different test scores for the same individual. So for example, a person has a raw score of 60 on a vocabulary test and a raw score of 45 on an arithmetic test. Which score is better? We cannot tell. The direct comparisons are not possible. However, after we convert both scores to a standardized scale, we can realistically compare them. So standardized scores occur by converting raw score distributions. They provide a constant normative or relative meaning, allowing for comparisons between individuals. Specifically, standardized scales express the person's distance from the mean in terms of a standard deviation. Standardized scores are continuous and have equality of units. The two most commonly used standardized scores are the Z-score and the T-score. A Z-score. The mean is 0. The standard deviation is 1. Okay, we'll take a look at the bell curve. You've seen this from week number 1. The range for a standard deviation is -3 to +3. A way to remember a z-score is a z should remind you of 0, which is the mean of the distribution. T-score, okay? The way to remember t-score is the t for transforming this standard score. Negative scores are eliminated, unlike the z-score, okay? The t should remind you of 10. 10 is the standard deviation for the t-score. The mean of the standard deviation of the mean of this standardized score, the t-score, is 50. And again, the standard deviation is 10. So the z, okay, has the mean of what? 0. The t has the mean of 50. The z, okay, has a standard deviation of 1. The t has a standard deviation of 10. Now remember, when we are giving the assessments, that we have to be very much aware of the reliability of that type of a test or measure. The degree to which the test can be expected to provide similar results for the same subjects on repeated administration. All right? Types of reliability is stability. Okay, can it be tested and retested? Does it have internal consistencies? Also, we want to remember validity. Validity is the degree to which the test measures what it purports to measure for. So, for example, would I want to give an intelligence assessment if I'm trying to measure one's mood, such as depression? So again, here's a slide of what a normal distribution looks like. Take a look at the Watson and Flamez 2015 text on page 39. Should give you a brief update of how standard deviations look. With standardized versus non-standardized assessments, remember that standardized, the instruments are administered in a formal, structured procedure, and the scoring is very specific. In non-standardized, there's no formal or routine instructions for administration or scoring. Some examples of non-standardized might be checklists or rating scales. With tests and inventories, all right, remember these are typically mentioned in the context of an application type. So for example, intelligence. Intelligence is ability to think in abstract terms, to learn. Some also believe it's the ability to adapt to an environment and to adjust. This can also be called a general ability. Some intelligence tests are the Stanford-Binet intelligence scales, the Wechsler scales, and also the cognitive ability test. You also have some specialized ability scales that can be the Kaufman assessment or a system of multicultural pluralistic assessments. What also falls in this category is like the ACT, which is American College Test Program, or the SATs. even the GREs that perhaps you had taken. You have achievement assessments. These measure the effects of learning or sets of experiences, such as the California Achievement Test, the Iowa Test of Basic Skills, or the Stanford Achievement Test. You have some specialized achievement tests, such as the GEDs, the General Education Development. We have aptitude. These are also called ability tests. And these measure the effects of general learning and are used to predict future performances. You have the ONET Ability Profiler. You have the Armed Service Vocational Aptitude Battery. We also have personality assessments. This is dynamic product of genetic factors, environmental experiences, and learning to include traits and characteristics. These can include projective assessments, such as the Washout, the TAT, the Rotter Incomplete Sentences, or Draw a Person test. Under personalities, we also have inventories, personality inventory assessments. This can include the MMPI-2, which is a Minnesota Multifaceted Personality Inventory. We have the CPI, which is a California Psychological Inventory. You have also the Beck Depression Inventory. The Myers-Briggs also falls under this set of assessments. We also have assessment groups that's called interest preferences, which is the likes and dislikes of an individual, and what values one values. Well, that's kind of redundant there. Perhaps includes what one values. It does note that oftentimes interests are not stable within the adolescent years. But you have the strong interest inventory and the self-directed search, and you have the ONET interest profiler. Those are some of the more known ones. When you're doing assessments, realize there's some variables. Sometimes the participant is conscientious about being watched or questioned. Sometimes they want to be perceived as likable. So you need to monitor what are the behaviors the individual is giving you. Also, some of these assessments, such as the MMPI, has where they can note when someone is trying to present well or present not well. You're also going to do some case histories. And then you're going to be using, interpreting all these different scales, right? You'll need training in each of these individual assessments that I told you about. You're going to understand the test technical manual. You're going to prepare for the test. How is it administered and not to deviate from it? Understand the scores. Are they giving you raw scores? How to convert it into a different score? You're going to organize the data so it makes sense to you and to the client, and perhaps to a third party, maybe an MD or to the school. Go slowly. Note the percentile ranks. And then lastly, note any ethical issues. Are the tests biased? Are they cross-culturally normed? Tests may be used to label or diagnose people, so we have to be aware of our code of ethics and legal issues regarding confidentiality. Some assessment resources are the Burroughs Mental Measures Yearbook. We also have another resource called Tests in Print. And these are where you can take a look at, if you want to do an assessment, you can take a look at these guides, and it will help you to determine what is an appropriate assessment to give for the individual that you're trying to work with. So as you can see, with assessments, we have to determine, what's appropriate for the individual or groups of individuals. How do we give that assessment? Is it standardized or not standardized? How do we interpret the scores? Where are we ethically and legally with distribution and giving out the information of these scores? Overall, it's like a big puzzle. It's much more easier these days than in the past where we did mostly hand scoring. Now our computers do it, so it's much easier to give a battery of assessments, a number of assessments, to give a clear picture of what's going on with our client. Until next time, I'll see you all later. Bye.